Maryland basketball has a must-win game against UCLA.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. I'm also doing work at InsideBlackandGold.net, so make sure you guys head over to InsideBlackandGold.net for all your latest Terps news. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I think that Maryland basketball has a must-win game tonight against UCLA. In college basketball, there's not a ton of must-win games. If you're a decent team, if you do what you're supposed to do, there's not a ton of must-win games. But I think Maryland basketball has one tonight against UCLA. The Terps, after dropping two straight on the road, not playing their best ball, dropping one to Washington, a team that I just saw Michigan State blow out, a Washington team that Illinois beat as well, even though it was a closer game, a Washington team that doesn't look that great, that doesn't have any good wins, solid wins, except for Maryland. Maryland loses to that team where they were favored by 6 points, a win that you're expected to get. And then you lose to Oregon in the last couple of minutes of the game, and you can't close it out. And now you're sitting at 1-3 in the Big Ten, and you have the 22th ranked UCLA team coming into your house. Both teams actually coming off losses, and I think that there's a lot of kind of talk between both programs needing a win here. But I think for Maryland, in my perspective, Maryland, it's a must-win game. But UCLA, they're coming off of two straight losses as well. They lost to Nebraska by 8 points. They lost to Michigan by nearly 20. So maybe UCLA fans would argue that this is a must-win game for UCLA as well. They did have a big win against Gonzaga the week before to kind of level things out, a type of win that we don't have yet. But this UCLA team has lost two straight, and I do think they're searching for a really big win in the Big Ten. But in terms of the Maryland perspective, eventually we got to put some solid wins on the table. I think a lot of people have been waiting. A lot of people have been starting to question this team. People are starting to ask, how good really is this team? Is this team good enough to make the tournament? Is this team going to let us down? Is this team going to pick up a decent win? And we're yet to have a good win. A good win. Villanova continues. Thank God Villanova has turned it on. That continues to look like a better win as we go. I think they just beat UConn. I think the UConn player missed a couple of free throws down the stretch. The Villanova win does look better, but other than that, Syracuse win doesn't look great. All these other wins we have just don't look that good. And it's a lot of cheap type of wins. And eventually, if you're a Maryland team that a lot of people think are good, think they're talented enough to make the tournament, you're going to have to beat some teams. And UCLA is the perfect opponent, currently ranked 22 in the country. They definitely 100% could fall. I'm not going to lie. They definitely could fall out of the top 25. If they beat Maryland, maybe they continue to stay around the top 25. I don't know exactly, but this is still a huge win that Maryland could get. And I think it's a must-win game for the Terps because there's just not unlimited opportunity, and you can't keep messing them up. The road trip really was one of those, okay, you mess up your road trip, you don't really want to lose two straight for the rest of the year. I don't know if you can do that, and you can't lose three straight. You just can't to a UCLA team. That's a good team, but I think it's a beatable. I think it's winnable for Maryland. I think they can win this game as well as I think it's a must-win game because this is a home game. The road trip, we know Kevin Willard has struggled on the road. We know he hasn't been at his best on the road. But this time we get UCLA at home. We get a home game, and Maryland's been really good and really tough to beat at home. And when you get a home game from a Maryland team that needs a win, it's a perfect time to play at home in front of your fans. And I'm guessing they'll show out a little bit. I don't know if they're still on break or what the situation is with that. I'm guessing people are starting to file back into school. It's around that time, but it's also a Friday night. And so I would think people would be at the game, and I think there's going to be a decent crowd. But a home game, you can't slip another one, a home game. You've slipped a couple of road games. It's not the end of the world, but you cannot slip a home game and a meaningful home game against a UCLA team that's really starting to kind of question themselves. I don't know if you saw what their coach said after their loss to Michigan, but he was talking about how that his players, they're just not doing what they're supposed to do. The coach didn't take any accountability, and it was a really bad look, I thought, for their coach to kind of he aired out a lot of different things after their loss to Michigan about his players. And I thought it was kind of crazy for a coach to do that. If you want to address your team and say that, that's different. But for your coach to say that to the media, that doesn't bring out the best out of the players. And I don't know exactly how their players will respond. I don't know if they'll be ready to go, excited. They'll want to prove their coach uh, wrong and that they want to do well, or they're going to kind of lose that relationship with their coach after he aired out a lot of stuff to the media. But I do think it being a home game and it just being a ranked opponent, we need some of these wins. I don't know how else to put it. Maryland needs some of these wins for their resume. We can talk about March all year. We can talk about all these different things later on in the season. But at the end of the day, if you don't put some wins up, we're not, when it comes down to it, we're not going to make it. And we can get maybe a couple wins later on and try and squeak in the tournament. But I don't want to squeak in. I don't want to be sweating at selection day, and I don't think they want to either. And I think for the momentum of this team, for this team to gather some confidence, I think it needs a big win against UCLA. And I really do believe this is a must win. This could really be an indicator how the rest of the season goes. I think if you win this game, play well at home, win the game by, I don't think you have to blow them out or anything. If you win the game by 1 point, I think it could start to bring momentum to this team. And next thing you know, you're winning a second game and a third game in a row. And maybe we start to get a groove. Maybe we start to get a streak. But if you lose this game, things could really start. People could really start questioning. People could really start talking about, or this team's not a tournament team. This team just played a week non-conference schedule. There's not a tournament resume. And it'll be hard to get back into it. There's plenty of games to go, and it's not going to be like the end all be all. But when you start to really look at it, it does feel like this UCLA game starts to feel like a must-win game for the Terps, and it feels like a game Maryland really does need to win at the end of the day. Let's talk about some of the matchups. Who needs to play well? Who do we need to stop for UCLA? We'll talk about that after this. This is a message from our sponsor, TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give you the taxes their undivided attention, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. So let's talk about some matchups in this game. Where does Maryland need to win? Who do we need to stop for UCLA? This is a solid UCLA team. They're definitely talented. He called their team soft, like I talked about. Their coach called their team soft, and all these different things are feel like they're kind of there's a lot of tension in the media with them, and their coach clearly isn't happy, but they still have a lot of talent and a lot of guys that can get things done. And I do think Maryland has a really interesting matchup against UCLA. But one thing that I think who their best player is this Tyler Bilodeau guy, really talented, really talented kid for them, a talented forward. I would say he's their best player right now. 6'9". He's actually a transfer from Oregon State, and he's definitely their top offensive weapon. He leads them in points and from the field, and attempts per game. So this is a kid where he's top on their team in scoring, but he only averages 14.7 points a game. So I'm not too concerned. I don't think he's as good as some of the guys that we've seen, but I do think that Reese and Queen need to play a decent defense on this kid because he's a kid that can definitely. This Tyler kid is definitely a guy that can go off, have a big game. I believe, and so when they play well, it's usually because he has a pretty good game. When they play at a high level, but I think one of the main things I'm going to be looking at is Maryland's big versus Tyler. How do they match up? I think Derek Queen's better, but Derek Queen, I've been saying, we need him to step up a little bit. He's the key to our success. He's the key to winning. And we need him to be a little bit better than he was, especially against Washington. But just overall against Oregon too. And so we'll see how Reese and Queen match up with Tyler. But I do think that Maryland can really win that matchup. And I do think our bigs are better, but I do think they have a really talented guy. One thing that UCLA that I think is a key to this game and a key matchup, UCLA is not that good rebounding. They're just rebounding 34 rebounds per game, and that's the fourth worst in the Big Ten. And they get the fewest defensive rebounds in the Big Ten. I think that that's something that can absolutely play at an advantage for Maryland. I think that Reese and Queen can really crash the glass against some of their bigs, whether it's Tyler. Or some of the other guys that they play. They don't have a ton of size in their starting lineup. When you look at the guys that play, they don't have a ton of huge guys that play a ton. And I think that's somewhere that Maryland could take advantage of. I think that that's something that Maryland can do well for themselves is really rebound the ball well because a lot of their top guys are more guard type of guys. And then that brings me to the next point. The guard play is really, really important in this game. They have some good guards. Definitely some good guards. They have the kid Kobe Johnson, who's a senior guard for them. That's averaging 7.8 points. They have Sebastian Mack, who we played last year, who's averaging 10 points. Eric Daly Jr., who's averaging 11 points. All really solid options at the guard spot and guys that Maryland's going to have to match up against and play well against. But I think of it from the Maryland perspective. I really look at it from Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, and Selton Miguel. Can those three guys put together all three having a good game, like all three having a good shooting performance, all three clicking at the same time, all playing at a high level defensively, because I haven't seen it all year. So I really want to believe that they can do that. But I haven't seen them do that. It feels like one guy clicks or the other guy clicks. They never all click at the same time. And I want to see against UCLA guards where I don't even think UCLA is crazy offensively. Like they don't have any guy that I'm like, whoa, and they don't have like two guys averaging 20, but they do have some consistency in their starting lineup and a bunch of guys that will contribute, and they play a lot of different guys. But I want to see how that kind of matches up overall for the Terps. Let's talk about predictions. What will actually happen in the game? Will Maryland win? Will UCLA win? I'll talk about that next. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. So visit the website and share betting lines around your team or league. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's talk some predictions for this game. Let's talk about who I think will win. And I've been a really positive Maryland supportive fan this year, and I'm going to stick with it. I think Maryland wins this game against UCLA. I do. The biggest part to me is that we're at home. Kevin Willard, Maryland basketball in general is just so much better at home. When we made the tournament a couple years ago with Kevin Willard, it was because of the home court advantage. When we played at home, we didn't lose. When we played on the road, we lost a good amount. And I believe being back at home, not having to travel out west again, and UCLA having to come to us and their travel and what they have to do and all that media and all those different things, their coach calling their players soft, different things like that. We'll see how their players respond. But UCLA has had some distractions. Like that was all over my Instagram, my Twitter, what the UCLA coach was saying. And I think they've been distracted a little bit. And I think the players are probably like, what the heck? Like, what is he trying to say? Like, why would he call us soft up there? Whatever. Like, it's one thing for him to say that to us. But I do think that Maryland playing at home is huge. We're just better at home, and we find trouble getting big wins on the road. We just do. So Maryland being able to win a home game, I think is something that is really something that Maryland is going to have to do, but I do think it's something that's going to have to happen. I also think we match up well against UCLA. I don't think they're anything crazy offensively. The thing is that when they're scary is that when they're playing really high level defense. But their defense has been pretty good all year, but this team doesn't score a ton. They just don't score a ton. Like they scored 65 to beat Gonzaga. They only scored 75 against Michigan when Michigan scored 94. They only scored 58 against Nebraska to Nebraska's 66. So sometimes their offense isn't good enough to win games and their defense plays well enough, but they just don't have enough pieces offensively. And I think Maryland matches up with that because I think Maryland's been a really good defensive team. And if we can turn them over a little bit, limit some of their success on the offensive side of the ball. I think Maryland can do enough to beat this UCLA team on offense because I think we're better offensively. I know Maryland struggles sometimes offensively, but I do think the Terps are a little better offensively and should have some success against UCLA in terms of the offensive side of the ball. But I do like Maryland to win this game. I like it to be a rather low-scoring game. I'm going to say 68 Maryland to 64 UCLA. So I do think UCLA keeps it close, and they're still a top 25 team, but Maryland's got to get up for this game. And if they don't win this game, I'm just going to start losing some confidence in the Terps. I'm not going to feel as good when I pick them. But I still feel pretty good. Like, you got to remember, we haven't gotten blown out yet. We haven't had a loss where it's like, this is the end. Like, we just lost by 30. The Washington loss felt like that a little bit, But it still feels like we're very much in the thick of things. We just got to get it going. And I think there's no better time to do it on a Friday night at home against a UCLA team that has to travel out, that's had a lot of media recognition with them. So I do think that the Terps should be able to win this game. And I do think that we're going to win this game. We'll see what happens. My predictions have been wrong. The Washington prediction was really awesome. My other predictions have been wrong, but I do think the Terps have enough to win this game. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps.